Welcome to the Online Great Books podcast, brought to you by OnlineGreatBooks.com, where we talk about the good life, the great books, great conversation, and great ideas. I'm Scott Hambrick.
I'm Karl.
And today, on the Online Great Books podcast, we're going to read Federalist Paper number 51. Who wrote this? It says Publius. What's this about?
Isn't it James Madison?
James Madison. Anon.
It's an anon. It's trying to get the people of the state of New York to vote to ratify the United States Constitution.
Yeah.
It is one of those ones that people point to. I remember people in Slack were talking about it the other day. I think our friend John Pascarello was talking about it. It's interesting. I have a warning to the listeners. I might get slightly, ever so slightly, political.
Good.
I will attempt not to name names.
That Lyndon LaRouche.
I thought it's a failed letter. I thought it's a big pile of failure.
Well,
frankly.
That's interesting because before we heated up the mics, this is what every show goes like for me and Karl. I've got some papers here in my hand. I'm banging them on my desk like Rush Limbaugh. This is how every show goes for us. We do this on Zoom. Karl records his end, I record my end, and then Brett Venat of School Sex Podcast, he puts it all together and makes it sound good. And before we hit record, we always start talking about important, fun things, and then we say, oh, no, we better get this on mic. I read this, and I thought, nice effort. We have problems that this approach here has not been able to do much about, you know?
So it's about separation of powers. It's about checks and balances and why you need to have them. And so it superficially sounds good. I think when you dig deeper, I think it hasn't worked. But we can go in more detail.
So I feel poorly about not being 100% enthusiastic about this paper. For me, the Federalist Papers, these founding documents, I have revered them for a very long time and have loved them very much. And so for me to have read this time and not been in love was a little upsetting for me. Is that jive? Did you have that?
Yeah. Well, maybe we ought to read some of it and see why we're complaining. And you, dear listener, can figure out why we're wrong. Maybe we should be happy about Federalist 51 and say everything's worked wonderfully. Mm-hmm. So it starts out, to what expedient then shall we finally resort for maintaining in practice the necessary partition of power among the several departments as laid down in the Constitution? The only answer that can be given is that as all these exterior provisions are found to be inadequate, the defect must be supplied by so contriving the interior structure of the government. We'll just pause right there.
I actually love that part.
Yeah, we want to have separation of powers, and the distinction that he makes between exterior provisions and interior structure is important, I think. Nothing exterior to the government is going to make the government do what you want it to, unless it's an invasion and a conquest. Or to put it in closer terms, you can complain about City Hall all you want, but they don't care.
Right.
There's nothing that you can say to them if their election is secure, that's going to make them care. One thing I thought about on this was a document that I love very, very much, the Declaration of Independence, which, has that thing in it. You know the thing. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable, or is it unalienable, rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, so rights given by God, that's what the document says, that are unalienable. Does that have any bearing on what governments do? Do they care about God?
No.
God does not have a legislative seat.
Do they actually care about rights?
I would say no.
They don't have to. If they do, it's a happy
Yeah, so
accident.
The Declaration of Independence has no power over the conduct of the Constitution or the government.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. There's so much here. Yeah, and people refer to the Declaration of Independence like it's part of legal canon. I don't think it's actually part of our I don't know, I'm not an attorney, body of law. It goes to describing our relationship with foreign powers. It goes to describe what some things that our colonial forefathers disliked, but it has no governing power in the United States.
Just the idea that we have the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. I agree with that. I think maybe you do.
Yeah.
Maybe you do, but your senator doesn't need to care about that unless God himself gets a seat in the Senate and a majority, then these rights that God gives you, presuming there is one, don't have any force.
Right. Yeah, we'd like for them to have all the force, but it's not a guarantee that they do.
If God were a senator, how would he be addressed?
Holy, honorable
Senator God.
Senator from the universe. The speaker would like to recognize the honorable Father of the universe.
The All Father, the creator of all.
Right. You wrap the gavel on him because he's going long.
And the Christians would be saying, well, he needs 3 seats.
Right. Jeez.
I'm sorry, we're recording this the day before Thanksgiving, so we're doing it outside of the ordinary time.
Yeah.
We're doing it late at night. We might be a little loopy.
Interesting things here.
So if you don't have exterior constraints, what can you do?
Yeah, he says, I love this idea here that he says, the defect must be supplied. So my reading of that, check my math here, Karl. He's saying that the government needs to have a defect in it such that it doesn't work very well. People will talk about, gridlock in Congress. That's the defect, or that's one of the defects he wants. He wants to be able to make action very difficult. Right?
Yeah, so let me read the rest of that sentence. The defect must be supplied by so contriving the interior structure of the government as that its several constituent parts may, by their mutual relations, be the means of keeping each other in their proper places. So we have the judiciary and the legislative and the executive, and they need to be fighting.
Yeah.
This is the plan. They're supposed to fight. Otherwise, there's too much authority going into the government, too much power.
You say fight, and I'll be a nerd here. Maybe fight isn't the right word. I get what you're saying, but he just wants them to be at cross purposes and to be in silos such that it just makes it hard to get stuff done. Right. I don't know that he's implying conflict, although that's certainly part of it, because he talks about setting men's ambitions, the ambitions of one man against the ambitions of another as a check. So he knows there's going to be some conflict.
Well, what's going to happen? If you have an executive branch, the executive is going to tend to want to increase the power of the executive.
Right.
The Congress needs to fight that. And if the judiciary should take more power than it is supposed to have, then the other two need to impeach him or something. I don't know. If you have a judiciary that has gone too far, then the other two branches need to fight it. It's not fighting with guns, but there are remedies built in to, there's the veto from the executive, there's impeachment for the executive, and I believe for the judges as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's never done. It's rarely done for the executive. It's never done for the Supreme Court.
And impeachment is nothing but giving them, I call it the mommy finger. When you point your index finger out and you just shame on you. Impeachments, it means nothing. If you had an honor culture, it might mean something.
It, in theory, removes you from the office.
Well, we've had, the impeachments are speeding up. I think Andrew Johnson was impeached. Nixon was not.
Nixon was not impeached.
Nixon was not. He darn near was. Maybe it was McKinley. Johnson, maybe McKinley, and then certainly Clinton, and now Trump. The time between impeachments seems to be halving. Then they continue to sign bills,
Yeah, so part of my problem with this document is I don't think, I think it's missing a few branches.
Yeah.
That needed to have competing powers set up to them. But we can talk about that as we go. Should we go to the second paragraph?
Sure.
So it's got to be interior to the government. If you don't build it into the DNA of your government, of your constitution, then something's going to take all the power.
Yeah.
For me, this is modeled on the Roman Constitution, which, if you ever see a diagram of it, is a big spaghetti chart of people that have mutual veto power. It probably grew up organically, but it's a beautiful thing. You know, there's so many competing interests that if they do anything, they'll be unified.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's hard to do anything.
Right.
Well, they had a Senate. We have a Senate. You know, so we borrowed the name.
I did a little lookifying, and it was Johnson, Clinton, and then Trump. No McKinley.
No, I think they shot him.
Yeah.
Which is a different kind of impeachment.
You know, he makes a bunch of practical, structural suggestions about how you shouldn't let one department have any say-so about hiring in another department. You know, just a bunch of practical things like this, like that in here that were probably novel at the time. I'm sure that in Great Britain, there were people that thought about this kind of thing in terms of their system of government, but they had never codified it. They still don't have a written constitution. I'm not aware of an English Federalist, anti-Federalist paper, public, open letter discourse about this stuff. So, that's novel and new and good at this time. I'm trying to be generous. I'm super irritated about this.
Well, so our senators are elected nowadays by popular vote in the states. I believe originally they would be selected by the state legislature.
Right. So the state legislature in Oklahoma would elect 2 senators to represent not the people of Oklahoma, the state of Oklahoma.
The only ones that would be directly elected would be the House of Representatives.
Right.
So each bit of the government would have its own way of getting its members, and they'd be independent. So you mentioned the King of England. The King of England, I think, could probably elevate somebody to the House of Lords, right?
Yep. Give them peerage.
Yeah, so the peers then have a dependency on the sovereign, which we don't have here in theory. So the president can't name a senator. And the judges, so I thought what was interesting, you can tell from me that the judiciary is a concern. This is where I'm getting slightly political, dear listener. There's a problem with the judiciary, so it might be different for them. So, and this is the last bit of this paragraph, because the permanent tenure by which the appointments are held in that department must soon destroy all sense of dependence on the authority of conferring them.
Was he right about lifetime appointments making the judiciary independent? And if so, is that good? Is it actually good to select a judge at age 51 and do set it and forget it? And now they just have 30 years of unaccountability, or 35 or 40 years of unaccountability ahead of them.
Well, they're supposed to be able to be judges then and not be political.
Well, I understand that, but it also removes a certain accountability from them as well.
Yeah. Well, the lawyers amongst our audience are going to probably yell at me because I'm going to mangle this, but I think it was the Marbury decision that established judicial review so that the Supreme Court gets to decide if things are constitutional or not. I don't believe that was ever their original function.
Right.
And so there you go. One branch now becomes supreme, and there's no checks on it. Well, there's a slight check. You could impeach, but who's going to impeach a Supreme Court justice?
Right. You can do that kind of McKinley train station type impeachment you were talking about.
To my knowledge, that's never been done.
Yeah, I'm not aware of that.
That's one of my complaints, is I think it doesn't envision what's going to happen to the judges. You can have where a state will vote on a popular referendum, and they'll vote on something, and so the will of the people is expressed, and then a judge will come along and say, nope.
Right. And
there's no recourse. And to me, that's a big flaw in our constitutional system.
I agree, but I don't have a better answer. How do you keep that from happening, but give the judges the power to strike down unconstitutional legislation? Maybe you don't give them the power. Maybe there should be another way to get rid of unconstitutional legislation.
Yeah. You know what it would be? The legislature.
Well,
the next legislature comes in and changes it.
Okay, the next one. Fair enough.
I don't know that you need to have a judiciary that says, no, that's unconstitutional.
Right.
they can rule. I don't know. The lawyers are going to yell at me, but
A lot of people are going to yell.
That establishes a precedent for all time that can never be altered. How can you have that in a republic?
Right.
I think there needed to be a better answer. I don't know. I'm sorry, Publius.
The legislature could overturn it, like you said, right? The president could veto it. Like it shouldn't even happen, right? The president, the executive magistrate, I think is what I don't know. Is that what he's talking about? Is that the president?
Yeah.
Could veto any unconstitutional legislation. But, I remember that the younger Bush I believe in his 8 years, only vetoed one bill, and it was related to kind of stem cell kind of thing.
If I were president, I would make it my goal to veto something every day.
I would veto. There would be almost nothing that would get through.
I'd get a veto sticker or a stamp that said veto, and every day I'd be, have I vetoed yet? Nope.
Obama only vetoed 12 packages. They don't use the darn thing.
Yeah, and if you don't use it, it's not a check. It shouldn't be a problem if you veto it, then you have to get 2/3 to override it. And if you really like it, you might need to build some consensus to get the thing that you wanted, which is part of the point of a divided government system. If you do anything, you'll have consensus because it's hard to do it.
I stand corrected. George W. Bush vetoed 12 bills. Obama, 12. Trump, 8. Bill Clinton, 36. Are you telling me that Bill Clinton only saw 36 bills that needed a veto? That's all. He only saw 36. Okay, so we've already seen 3 things happen. Right, Publius says, he's saying the stuff he's saying. And we already know that Marbury versus Madison has cropped up and changed the relationship between the judiciary and the other branches. The president has veto, but the truth of it is they don't use it.
And the legislative has impeachment, but doesn't use it, except occasionally for the executive. They'll probably use it more.
Every president from here on will be impeached, is my suspicion.
Yeah.
And then changing the Senate election from being elected to represent the state, which gives the state's rights kind of voice a vote in the legislature at the federal level, that is gone. So 3 significant checks are gone or crippled. We're only on page 2.
Yeah. The one that my friend John was talking about is this line in the middle of the, I think, 3rd paragraph. Ambition must be made to counteract ambition. The interest of the man must be connected with the constitutional rights of the place. It may be a reflection on human nature that such devices should be necessary to control the abuses of government. But what is government itself but the greatest of all reflections on human nature? If men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls on government would be necessary. In framing of a government which is to be administered by men over men, the great difficulty lies in this. You must first enable the government to control the governed, and then in the next place oblige it, that would be the government, to control itself. So there's a lot in there.
Ugh.
If men were angels, no government would be necessary. So people will say of whatever their favorite form of government is, if you point out all the times it's failed, and they've all failed. Right. There isn't a form of government that hasn't. Although I'll point out monarchy seems to be pretty stable. But they've all failed. I remember having a discussion with somebody about a guy, and I pointed out that his form that he preferred had been tried in Soviet Russia, and I considered it a failure. And his answer was, no, it wasn't really tried. You need to have the right people doing it. Right. Well, there ain't no right people.
Right. He tells us right here that men are no angels.
Yeah. So it's a little bit of political original sin. Okay? Not necessarily theological. Humans have ambition. We're short-sighted. We're going to screw it up. You're never going to get a government run by good people because there aren't any good people. Yeah. At least not in the sense that you would need to run a government. There aren't angels. Angels are divine beings that do not have physical bodies, at least according to Thomas Aquinas, and they don't have passions. They're intellectual. But we don't have that.
No.
So you have to bake into the pie some way to regulate the pie.
This is so hard. he
Tell me what's
identifies in
hard.
this paragraph here the problem. The problem, really, right, is the imperfectibility of man means that he requires governing, but you're in a catch-22 because the government must consist of these imperfect men. He nails it down here, and I'm trying to be generous. They did their best. I really believe they did their best. But I think that we're seeing that their vision has not been carried out, at least not this far out. What was this, 1789? Was that when it was?
Thereabouts. I thought it was 1787, but you have Google right there. You could look it up.
In the late 1780s, they ratified this Constitution. So we're 240 years out, 230 to 240 years out, and I don't think we're operating under the rules that they thought they had set forth. I also didn't see him mention in here, how do you actually make the physical document, the stuff on the paper, come to bear in reality? Right? People say you've got these protections by the Constitution and so on. The Constitution doesn't stop bullets. It doesn't stop mean people. It doesn't stop despots.
It doesn't stop unreasonable search and seizure. You can't just hold it up and say, am I being detained?
It doesn't stop anybody. And when it does, it's because everybody agreed anyway. How does it get force?
The only way it gets force is if you have jealous, ambitious, separate parts of government. The legislature should be very jealous of their power.
I'm meta that.
Okay.
I'm before that. How do you get, let's say that they wrote on that parchment the finest political document ever written, and maybe they did, and that it's completely without flaw. How do you get people to actually adopt it in the first place? Don't tell me they voted for it and they... No. That's not what I'm saying. How do you actually get the people to live by it and follow it? Now, I understand that you make the Senate and the House fight and that the president hates the Speaker of the House and the Supreme Court justices hate this. I get it. But like when the rubber meets the road, how do you get 375 million people to actually do the damn thing and insist that everybody else does?
Well, interesting you should bring this up. Later in the book, there's talk about, let's see, I'm counting back from the end. 1, 2, third paragraph from the end. He thinks it's going to be okay because America is such a diverse place. Go 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs from the end. Down at the end. If the majority be united by a common interest, the rights of the minority will be insecure. So what we need to have are different interests in the people. Okay? So this is a case where diversity is our strength.
Okay, so I read that. Let's say that these original 13 states, 13 colonies, were comprised of 700 groups of people equal in size and of equal power. How do you get them all to actually use the Constitution and abide by it? Where's the gun in the room?
Well, there needs to be 700 guns in the room, and they're all fighting for individual rights. And the problem is, if you have 351 of them who unite, then nobody's safe.
Right.
So it seems like, look at the next paragraph. So there's but two methods of providing against this evil. This evil is where the minority will have its rights trampled. And the first was an interesting thing. The first one, this goes back to, well, it doesn't go back to because it predates it, but Belloc talks about this. So one way to protect the rights of the minority is by creating a will in the community independent of the majority, that is, of the society itself. The first method prevails in all governments possessing a hereditary or self-appointed authority. So the king is the defender of the minority. Well, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
They own the place. They don't have political accountability. He thinks, this is the middle of the paragraph, this is at best A, precarious security because the power independent of the society may as well espouse the unjust views of the major as the rightful interests of the minor party and may possibly be turned against both parties. All right, so we don't want a king, but that's what a king is for.
You just said that the king doesn't have political accountability. That's not true, but I'll let that slide.
No, correct me by all means. We have to have an adversarial relationship, separation of powers on this podcast.
Yeah, ask Charles II.
Yeah, but it's a big hill to climb to kill your king.
Don't miss. Ask Nicholas. They have political consequences.
Mm-hmm.
Ask John the Bad. There are political consequences for the king. And it's beyond impeachment, right? It goes to posterity. It goes to honor. It goes to legacy. It goes to, the posterity question is the biggest one, What will life be like for the king's children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and so on? Yeah. Everybody, it's no secret that we're monarchists, is it?
Well, it isn't now. Vote for us because then you won't have to.
Right. I didn't have any sons, though.
So that's the first method, is to have a king, okay? You could judge how well it's worked. You can look at monarchies. And the second method, okay, so you were asking the question, how are we going to protect the rights of the minority, which is what divided government was for. So let me pause and explain this. I have a friend who said at one point, what democracy means, what pure democracy means, is that 51% of the people can pee in the coffee of 49% of the people, and it's legal.
That's right.
So having a constitutional government, rather than direct democracy, is to limit those 51 jackasses from peeing in your coffee.
Hear, hear.
That's the whole point of it. So the rights of the minority are extremely important. That's why we have a government. Otherwise, why not just let the majority rule? You don't need a constitution. You just take a plebiscite every month and decide who's going to get the 2 minutes of hate.
Yeah.
So it's to protect the minority, the landowners in Montana, for example, the people that there's less of. So how are we going to do that? Madison Publius has an answer. This, at best, is the second method, The second method will be exemplified in the Federal Republic of the United States. Whilst all authority in it will be derived from and dependent on the society itself will be broken into so many parts, interests, and classes of citizens that the rights of individuals or the minority will be in little danger from interested combinations of the majority.
He's a stinky smuggler here. Alistair McIntyre, in his book After Virtue that we read on the show, 50 episodes ago, said that he'd never seen a proof for natural rights. And I haven't either, They just say they're inalienable rights. We hold these truths to be self-evident, and then off they go.
Well, if you think there's a God that gave them, then they make sense.
Yeah, but you got to think that. There's still no proof. Now, I'm with you on it. But in the Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident, and then away they go. Like, it's shaky, okay? I think it's best that we all act like there are natural rights. It would be awesome if we could prove it. I think it's best. I think it's best. It's a convenient lie at worst, that we believe it. But anyway, like that problem, he says all authority in it will be derived from and dependent on the society. How is it derived from the society? That's what I'm saying. What is the mechanism whereby this authority is derived? Like, how do I connect those dots from 350 million people to the FBI or John Roberts, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court? How is that derivation done? It's not. They just said it.
He smuggled it in. Oh, these states ratified it. 51% of the people in that state, or whatever the hell it was. I mean, a bunch of people didn't ratify it. Now they're a minority that has to drink that constitutional coffee with the pee in it. Mm-hmm. Well.
And we are all minorities, right? Like, I've been drinking Busch Light lately. There aren't many people that like that.
Coors is better than Busch Light.
It is, but Uncle Henry likes Busch Light, so I have it around for him, so I've been drinking some. And my Uncle Henry likes Busch Light. He is a minority. But in other ways, he isn't, right? He's a 76-year-old adult, white male. Like, he's, in many other ways, he is not a minority. So it is very easy for someone to be a minority in some respects, but there to be huge majorities that are indefeatable in other respects, because we all contain multitudes.
Yeah, well.
So how do you deal with it? I'm disillusioned and heartbroken.
Yeah, I think don't be. It's the holidays.
Right, exactly.
And next week we're going to do, dear listener, you'll get this pretty soon. We're going to do the Charlie Brown Christmas album.
What does that mean?
We're going to talk about it and say how good it is and try to figure out why you should think it's good.
Yeah, that'll be on the Music and Ideas podcast. That'll come out about the 17th of December. That is such a good album. And then on this show, we'll be doing Dickens' A Christmas Carol.
Yep.
Got that right here.
So there is joy in Mudville. There are good things. So cheer up. I cheer you up, you cheer me up. That's how it goes. I think there's two things here. The one is one that nobody wants to talk about, which is where political power ultimately comes from. And it rhymes with schmilance.
Yeah, I asked where the gun in the room is.
Yeah, so political power ultimately, the reason why those kings had trouble, the reason why John the Worst signed the Magna Carta was because the barons made him do it with pointy sticks.
Right, they didn't ask. Well, they asked, but I mean, it wasn't just of a polite request.
So the way that the Constitution is enforced is by the potential of violence from the people. I don't know that...
The people?
Yeah.
No, he says here, right at the very beginning, on page 12, it's in the third paragraph, you must first enable the government to control the governed. All right, cat's out of the bag. It's really game over. And then step 2, in the next place, oblige it to control itself. So, he's sneaking this stuff in here about deriving this authority from the governed, but he says right there in the third paragraph, the order of operations, it actually can't be done. And there are probably a lot of people that are mad at me right now because these things are like holy, right? This Constitution and the Federalist Papers and the Declaration of Independence, for so many of us, are just nigh unto holy, and they have been for me as well. I can't do better, guys. But the problem is that I don't think that enough normal people see the flaws in the system. I think we would be better off if regular, middle-of-the-road people saw that there were challenges here and that these men did their best but have fallen short. There are a lot of people that see problems with this, but many of them are quite radical, right? And they want to throw it completely out, institute something different, some Abby Hoffman types, let's say. Is he dead? Can we talk about Abby Hoffman?
Yeah, and there's no rule that well, I guess there is. There is the dead politician rule. Was he a politician?
As far as I'm concerned.
There's a movie about him.
That's another thing I wanted to bring up about this. A great deal of political power lies outside of the government.
Yeah, for sure.
What does it do about that? Zilch.
It does zilch about that. It talks about this. So I want to go back to the third paragraph from the end. I should have numbered them.
We started at the beginning. We moved to the end. We'll get the middle here later, guys. At the end of the show, we'll get there.
So the second method will be exemplified in the Federal Republic of the United States. And this is the bit about society itself will be broken into so many parts, interests, and classes of citizens that the rights of individuals or of the minority will be in little danger from interested combinations of the majority. All right. So you need to have checks and balances in the people themselves. And there's no provision in the Constitution to preserve that. Well, maybe there was, but it's been bulldozed with Eisenhower, with the interstate highways and the great smushing of everything. So if Rhode Islanders and New Yorkers are different enough that they don't have much common cause, that is a check on the power of the government.
Yeah.
But if Rhode Island is just a suburb of New York, like to my Midwestern perception, most of the Northeast is, it's a problem. If every city that you go into in the United States is culturally the same, which it is, in my opinion, then you don't have the necessary diversity to make this work. I don't mean diversity in ethnic groups, but maybe I do, but diversity of interest.
Right.
You know, Oklahoma should be Oklahoma-ish. Illinois should have its own distinct character.
Mm-hmm.
So that we fight.
Yeah, it's best for the political system that we had given to us for that to be so. For you, Illini, to be weird.
And we are. Yeah, we are. We gave you Lincoln.
Yeah, thanks. There's just some more states' rights stuff. Oh, but it wasn't about... Shut up.
You know, look, if you're a Lincoln fan, and I think I'm about 63% a Lincoln fan, because it's land of Lincoln. It's on my license plate.
Right.
You know? Nevertheless, suspension of habeas corpus and use of the force of the government to prevent secession, boy, that's a big step. And the Civil War is something that it's worth your time to chew over, to chew on, and think about. It's more complicated than you think.
No, boy, what a hairball. Just terrible.
Yeah. Lots of great individual stories in that, by the way. I think it's the American Iliad. You know, just read about Gettysburg and Pickett's Charge or something, and you've got Achilles and Hector.
He says that these minorities will be in little danger from interested combinations of the majority, but I don't think that's true. I think that with ease of communications, ease of transportation, mass media, the non-separation of state and education, that people have found ways to create majorities and to identify that are able to take political power from or do political damage to certain minority groups.
So maybe this was a document that works best with 1780s technology.
I don't want to say that is true, because I think there are timeless truths in here that pay no heed to the semiconductor, you know. But I think that ignoring the political power that resides outside of the government is a major flaw in our Constitution. I'm not smart enough to tell anybody how that you would preserve free speech, a free press, and all of those things in the Bill of Rights, and also serve to limit aggregation of political power outside of the government. I don't know how you would do that, but there's nothing in here about the Koch brothers or whatever your least favorite charitable foundation activist entity is, right? Like there are, like corporations have status as individuals in our court system. You know, all kinds of strange things have happened, and this Constitution has nothing to say about it.
This bit about the degree of security depending on the number of interests and sects in the United States is not something I ever learned about. I do remember reading about if men were angels, we wouldn't need a government. Mm-hmm. I remember hearing about separation of powers. Never heard about the necessity to keep the people divided, which Madison has in this letter.
Yeah.
So for me, that's real interesting.
Keep Americans weird.
Yeah, I think I'm in favor of that. But I don't know how we do it. I would like it if we did less stuff, and the things that we did it in a more unified way.
In terms of government, you mean? You would wish the government did fewer things.
Yes, and the things that we did, then we would be more unified. So there's problems with the way that we do it. But there's two elements that he doesn't consider that I consider governmental agencies in their scope of power, and that is the press and the bureaucracy. Mm-hmm. So those are the fourth and fifth branches of government. There's probably 6 or 7. I haven't counted them all. There's 3 officially. But with the easy conglomeration of the press, that's a huge voice. That's pretty unaccountable. And then bureaucracy as well. So you all know, if you're a regular listener, my favorite television show of all time, I don't watch TV much anymore, just Hallmark, but my favorite television show of all time is Yes, Minister, which is set in England. Jim Hacker, I think, is the member of parliament, and then Sir Humphrey Appleby is the civil servant that works with him. And you get to see who's really in charge, because the civil servant will be there when Hacker goes away, and he knows it. And all he's got to do is wait out the member of parliament, and eventually he'll get his way. So bureaucracy is, well, what is it? So you make a law. You do the right thing. So let's say, God forbid, but let's say I stand and I run for House of Representatives in the state of Illinois. Okay. I wrote myself in once, but I didn't win. All right. So I go off to Washington. Karl goes to Washington. And I get an idea for a bill, like from Schoolhouse Rock. Okay. I'm just a bill sitting here on Capitol Hill. Okay. And I get it passed, and the president signs it. And it's a law that I think is a good law. Well, I don't enforce it. The executive branch enforces it. And what they do is they set it off to rulemaking. They send it off to bureaus. Alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. Sounds like a fun bureau, but it's not. Doesn't that sound like a party?
Yeah, it does.
As long as it's in the right order. I don't want to have the firearms last. I want them first. And then the alcohol. And then the tobacco is, that could be either. But they send it to rulemaking. And most of the stuff that you have to deal with in your daily life, the forms that you have to fill out, the hoops that you have to go through, were not voted by Congress. All of that was delegated to the civil service. The bureaucracy, hard word to say, bureaucracy. That has its own interests. And I really recommend Yes, Minister, because I think it's probably accurate. The interests of the bureaucracy are its self-preservation and expansion. And there's no checks on it in our constitutional system.
Yeah. I've got a friend who says that every single government job should be by lottery, and you have it for 3 years.
William F. Buckley said he'd rather be ruled by the first 500 people in the Boston phone book,
right,
than the faculty of Harvard.
Yeah.
I think he's right on that.
Yeah. And if you say that government wouldn't be very effective with that, okay.
You mean we wouldn't be able to go off to wars in foreign places as easily? That'd be terrible.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. This is the most political show we've ever done.
Yeah.
Dear
I don't
listener,
feel good about that, but I don't know what else to do.
If we're poking at you, you can always just go to the next one where we talk about Charles Dickens.
Right.
Or, look, I have no ill will. Just think about the stuff we're talking about and see what you think. That's the whole point of this.
Go read the paper, too. It's a shorty.
Yeah, it's 5 pages on my printout.
Yeah, it's a shorty. You should go get it. The idea that he wants to install a defect in the government, that he really doesn't want the thing to work. He wants it to set it at loggerheads, is really important, I think. I hear people talk about, I've gotten mad about this since I started voting, when I would vote for somebody and they would get elected, and then they would reach across the aisle and bipartisan. I don't want you to do that.
If I wanted you to reach across the aisle, I would have voted for the other guy.
Right. I want you to stand on the brake. I want you to, when they do something, stand on the brake, and then you need to do all the things that you need to do. Don't do that.
I have met my congressman. I wish he were more of a thorn. I didn't want him to get along with anybody. He got voted out this year, in the primary. It's supposed to be adversarial. It's okay. That's what's in the system. They're supposed to fight.
Right.
I was thinking, I have a friend, Bill. I'm not sure if he listens. I haven't seen him in a while. But Bill married a Japanese girl. And so he goes over to Japan quite a bit. And he knows the language and everything. But he told me something about, and the Japanophiles, is that the right word? Will correct me on this. Something like that. They'll be like pottery that they'll put a flaw in. They'll crack it and then fix it. And like put gold on the cracks and everything.
Wabi-sabi.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, the beautiful imperfection.
Well, that's what the Constitution is supposed to be. It's supposed to be an unholy mess.
Right.
Because you had unified government in England. That's what they got away from. The unified government that they considered a tyranny.
It says, let me see here. 1, 2, 3. This is the top of paragraph 4, Karl.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
A dependence on the people is, no doubt, the primary control on the government. But experience has taught mankind the necessity of auxiliary precautions. Blah, 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 blah. I wrote, is our government actually dependent on the people? When they can print money and they don't have to tax, it's a perpetual motion machine, man.
Until it stops.
Until it stops.
Yeah, that's an interesting bit. In the current crisis, we have manufactured a whole lot of money out of nothing. If they can do that, what do they need you for? Why, when I file my quarterly taxes, why do I need to do that? If they could just add a zero to the debt, that's a good point. Probably a constitution like this requires a gold standard or something like it.
Yeah. There's two sides of this coin, right? That if the government has a dependence on the people, then the people have power over the government.
Which we hope should be the way it should be.
And I'm not sure how dependent they are on me and you and the rest of those folks that are out there pitching every day.
Well, so let's make that a double. Violence and money. That's how the government's dependent on the people.
Well, yeah, that's right. We need to read some Lysander Spooner. You ever read any of that?
No.
Late 19th century anarchist?
I already like him.
Yeah, interesting guy. Let's say for a moment, Spooner talks about what you can do to exert power. If the government, let's grant this to him, if the government is dependent on the people, what can you do with that dependency that they have on you, to exert a check or a balance on the activities of the government right now? Trust me, I've been trying to figure that out.
You could write your congressman. You could go to town meetings.
Maybe. I mean, I could go to the town meeting in my town, but there's 18,000 people in my town.
Yeah, but probably 10 of them show up.
Right, and I know all of them. No.
They were like, oh my gosh, Hambrick's here.
Oh, yeah. I'm normal around here.
I'm not normal around here. I've been reading, last couple of weeks, I've been doing Cicero with our members here at OGB, Online Great Books. And good discussions. We do 2 books currently. We might switch it, but we do a fragmentary book called The Republic, and then we do On Friendship, How to Be a Good Friend. Boy, that Republic gets to me. Cicero's Republic gets to me because in the beginning of it, he talks about the duty that you have to get involved in politics. And he's kind of making fun of people that say, well, they're all corrupt. I don't want to do it. Well, if they're corrupt, that's more reason for you to do it. Or I'll wait until they really need me. No, you can't wait till they really need you, because the only way that you can do something good is if you're in office. So you can't, if you let other people do it, they'll do it. And so you have to get involved and it's challenging because I don't want to do it. But I can't see that he's he's wrong, that the way the people need to be very engaged in order for this kind of a thing to work. They need to be very engaged. They need to raise holy hell at the town meetings, at the state legislature. They need to march. They need to call. They need to be very annoying so that the government doesn't forget that they have people.
Yeah, it's important, if what you say is true, and I think it is, it's important that the power be at the lowest possible level. That means if there are 100 political decisions being made today, as many of them as possible need to be made at my town hall meeting so I can actually be there. Because, we're all trying to work. We can't go to D.C. or, wherever the heck it is. He says here that under this United States Republic system, there are actually 2 entire governments at loggerheads here. And he means that of your state and then that of the federal government. The business of our states is much smaller than it once was. That makes it hard to be involved.
Well, the percentage of the state's interest versus the national has gone down. And probably this is, again, the case where you ought to read about the Civil War. It's probably the biggest event in American history because it changes everything, and it gives states' rights a bad name because it's connected with slavery. But without states' rights, what's the difference between U.S. Constitution and anyone else? It's built into the system. They're supposed to be adversaries. What does it say in the Constitution? All the rights not expressly granted to the federal government lie with the states and the people. Well, if you don't have states, then they don't have rights. So that darn Civil War is a big problem. In my opinion.
Oh, gosh, we're making people mad. Made a guy mad on Twitter.
Yeah?
Yeah. He says, why not talk about the books on your reading list? I don't get what you're doing on this show. Michener, Ian Fleming, about to unfollow.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
beat it. Look, let's say we did. Let's pause for a minute. Let's say we did that. So you're the owner of Online Great Books. I'm whatever I am at Online Great Books. Okay?
You're our big toe.
Yeah. If we went through our reading list, that's a good question, though.
It is a good question.
Twitter person. That's a good question. Why don't we do it? Because if we did it, then there's a canonical opinion from the owner about one of the books that we read. I don't think you want to do that. You have whatever opinions you think are right and just about the books. And so we have to have something to talk about. And we talk about books. We talk about books that are pretty good, if not great. But they're not ones typically you're going to read in the program. So you're not infected by us talking in your ear hole.
Yeah. We did a show about Walker Percy's Loss of the Creature. And go read that. It's a short essay. Go read that. Listen to that show perhaps if you need to. And that describes why we don't do this. We don't want to mediate people's experiences of these books. We don't want to hear us run our dumb mouths about whatever it is before they go read it.
It's bad enough we're poisoning Federalist 51 for you.
Yeah, I can't poison enough. We did a show about the Iliad, and we did one about the Republic on Online Great Books podcast, and we do read those books, and I have considered pulling those off the feed.
We really do want you to think.
Yeah, and you don't have to think what I think. You don't. You couldn't. I'm nuts.
Well, I don't think what I think.
Right. I read all of these Federalist Papers. I was in my mid-20s, I think. And just loved it all. 46-year-old Hambrick in 2020. Has a great deal of respect for what the guy did, but I do see some areas that we don't have a good check on. And I can see more clearly the things that have happened to the way our government works that have destroyed a number of the checks and balances that he's advertising in here. A book that I would love to do on this program, but I can't for the reasons you just described, is Aristotle's Politics, Book 5, where he talks about the sources and types of revolution. Go read that. You don't have to read the whole darn book, Aristotle's Politics, but if you're interested in this kind of thing, you might go look at Book 5, where he talks about revolution. And for Aristotle, revolution isn't necessarily killing people and getting out the guillotine and throwing everybody in the government out in the street and then writing up a new constitution. It's not anything like that necessarily, but it's about events that could cause sea changes in political action inside of a government. Does that sound right, Karl?
Mm-hmm.
By that? And I write up these little emails I send our clients. It says, hey, this week you're supposed to be reading pages 1 through 71, whatever. They almost never read 70 pages in a week, but something less than that. When you read this, you might think about blah, 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 and I'll ask a few questions, and I try them not make them be leading. But in the one about Aristotle's Politics, book 5, I said, how many Aristotelian revolutions can you point to in the history of the United States? Karl, I can do 15 of them without even thinking.
Did you have Elvis?
Yes.
And what's the whole point of talking about political science and everything? Politics is ethics on the grand scale. Ethics is about living well. Politics is about living well for lots of people. So the interest in reading the Federalist Papers or the Anti-Federalist Papers, which are out there, by the way.
We need to read some of those. They're
the ones that lost the argument. Is, you're interested in the good. And you're interested in how to do it better. Go to the second to last paragraph. We're just ping-ponging around this thing. This is about 2/3 of the way down in the paragraph. This is why it's important. Justice is the end of government, end meaning goal. It is the end of civil society. It ever has been and ever will be pursued until it be obtained or until liberty be lost in the pursuit. In a society under the forms of which the stronger faction can readily unite and oppress the weaker, anarchy may as truly be said to reign as in a state of nature, where the weaker individual is not secured against the violence of the stronger. I put that in bold.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have a constitutional government, if you don't have some form of limits on power, then you might as well be living in the primeval forest where Big Jake, with his big club, rules the place until somebody else kills him. It's anarchy. Government means that, for me, that was the best point of this letter. That government means that the rights of the minority must be preserved. Otherwise, it's not a government at all. And they didn't teach me that part in school.
You said right at the top of this that the paper is a swing and a miss for you.
Yeah.
Those aren't your exact words. Where does it miss, Karl?
It is missed in that the judiciary, in my opinion, has expanded its power beyond any reasonable bounds. The judiciary tells the executive and legislative what they can do, and the other two branches don't say anything back. I think that's a problem that they didn't envision. Bureaucracy as a fourth branch of government is not envisioned. I think the necessary diversity of the nation is not something that could be sustained with 19th and 20th and 21st century technology. When you can have a Twitter mob, I don't know how you can protect the rights of the minority. He needs things that we don't have in order to make it work. I'm not sure how to do it better.
Yeah, I'm just sniping here, and I have not much to add. But if somebody holds a political view that mainstream business holds to be anathema, they can't do banking.
That's right.
There are examples out there.
There are. People get debanked. Can you imagine?
And we don't have a gold standard anymore, so you can't go carry pieces of 8 into the store and go buy what you need. So there are people that find it very, very difficult to just live here because of that. And this document has nothing for those people.
Well, what would you need? You need some checks and balances. And here is, I think, as a companion piece to Federalist 51, go back and listen to the essay on distributism. Because Belloc's got some ideas for some other checks and balances.
Yeah.
For him, he wanted it to be more difficult to amass capital. Mm-hmm. Big amounts of it. I think that might be a check that you need to have in order to preserve the rights of the minority. I don't know that you can have the big tech that we have right now and their power and have a free government. But how do you compete with the world's biggest search engine?
Right.
I don't know.
A free market is not in the Constitution.
No, it isn't.
It's not. Something that kind of smells like free market might be our praxis, but it's actually not in the founding documents. So there's no active check on some of those problems. I was talking to, in Slack, I rarely get to talk to Pasquarella on the phone or anything like that. I would like to do that more, but he and I sleep at different times or something. I don't know. And he loves Federalist Paper 51. This guy, Pasquarella, for somebody who doesn't teach this actively, it isn't like in some constitutional law department or something like that, knows this better than anybody I've ever seen. He says, well, in Federalist Paper 57, he knows all of it.
He doesn't sound like that, though.
He doesn't sound like that, but that's the way I hear it.
He has a lovely voice.
And I love the guy. And he sent a piece of Machiavelli to us, and I'd like to read it. It's about a paragraph. Machiavelli says, "It is to be noted by this text how detestable calumnies are in free cities and in every other mode of life, and that to repress them one should not spare any order that may suit the purpose. Nor can there be a better order for taking them away than to open up very many places for accusations. For as much as accusations help republics, so do calumnies hurt. Between one side and the other, there is the difference that calumnies have neither need of witnesses nor of any other specific corroboration to prove them, so that everyone can be calumniated by everyone. But everyone cannot, of course, be accused, since accusations have need of true corroborations and of circumstances that show the truth of the accusation. Men are accused by magistrates, to peoples, to councils. They are calumniated in piazzas and in logias. Calumny is used more where accusation is used less, and where cities are less ordered to receive them. So an orderer of a republic should order that every citizen in it can accuse without fear or without any respect. And, having done this and observed it well, he should punish calumniators harshly. They cannot complain if they are punished, since they have places for open hearing of the accusations of him whom one has calumniated in the logias. Where this part is not well ordered, great disorders always follow, for calumnies anger and do not punish citizens, and those angered think of getting even, hating rather than fearing the things said against them." Calumny.
Which is whispering about somebody, telling stories, gossip, right?
Gossip, false accusations, character assassination, false statement maliciously made to injure another's reputation, utterance of maliciously false statements, slander.
Okay, so is that another check we need to have?
Maybe.
Like, I can go accuse somebody and have evidentiary procedures and everything whenever I want?
Well, he says that whenever you want, yeah. Maybe that's a little much. You end up clogging the accusation system. But more than that, I like what I see in that first paragraph. To repress them, one should not spare any order that may suit the purpose. If somebody levels calumny at someone, slander, character assassination, so on, the full weight of the entire government needs to come down on them.
To me, this is a little bit different. So Madison envisions a diverse society. He's not writing a law for a city. He's writing a constitution for a nation, 13 original colonies, and it's going to get bigger. It seems like Machiavelli wants there to be more unity in the city by getting rid of all of the little calumnies. We want to have a more unified. If you're going to do it, it has to be an accusation.
Right.
And I'm just trying to map that on Madison's idea that there ought to be competing sects. We don't want them all to agree. If they all agree, then it doesn't work. I don't know. For me, that's the biggest eye-opener for me rereading this, is the idea that the very diversity of the people is a check on the government.
Yeah. So I read that and I thought, well, how diverse were the people? I hate that word. That word has been narrowed. This is like we read the Iris Murdoch Against Dryness essay some time ago.
Mm-hmm.
The use of that word has been narrowed to the point that it's not as useful as it once was.
Well, I'm not sure he uses the word diversity. Maybe he doesn't use that word.
in 1780s North America, what, 80% of the people here were farmers? What, 90%? Right?
But, okay, so how diverse were they? So you would have Southern planters. You would have New England farmers, which would be a different kind of farming, right? Just the land itself would make a diversity of interest.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you could have South Carolina say, we need to do this to help the cotton trade. And the people in the North saying, oh, but that would hurt us.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there was religious differences too, which it seems that Madison would want to have persist. So you'd have Puritans and Presbyterians and Episcopalians and a couple of Catholics in Maryland. Here's a secret. It's not really named for Queen Mary.
Uh-oh.
It's named for Mary, the Mary.
Were there more political interests in 1789 than there are now?
Yeah, I think so. I think now we've got two tribes. We have two big tribes in the United States. Emerson said, if I know your sect, I know your argument. So whatever the talking points are that day, it's amazing. You'll see everybody in that group will repeat them.
Yeah.
Things they didn't believe 5 years ago.
That's interesting that you say that, because I wasn't even thinking about our sort of two-party system. I was reading that. I was thinking about capital and business and commercial interest. There's Bezos.
Well, that's interesting we went here. So this wouldn't work then with parties, because parties iron out all those differences.
Mm-hmm.
The whole idea is to get enough people together to make your majority dominant. And so you have to have the big tent and you get everybody in and they're all pledge allegiance to your political party. Washington was right that we shouldn't have any. How would you? So there's another check that we don't have here, a check on political parties.
Here in Oklahoma, we have to take civics, I think in 8th grade. And I remember reading about these procedural rules they have in the House and in the Senate. Get this filibuster. They got all kinds of stuff going on. None of that's in the Constitution. And it directly affects how you get governed. I think it's unconstitutional. They don't have the right to filibuster.
Well, except each house has the ability to set its own rules. The filibuster could be voted out whenever they want to.
It's true.
It's just a rule they're agreeing to abide by.
It's true.
And they do it because they fear that they'll be in the minority next time.
Mm-hmm. Back to the number of political interests in the country. The two-party system necessarily puts us in a funnel that has, two outlets. I also think that because of our, transportation, media, our food supply chain, and supply chain in general, that there are probably fewer types of jobs than there were then as well. Yeah, there are fewer occupations, even though at that time, 80%, 90%, I don't know, of the people in North America were in, agrarian in some way. Now you've got spreadsheet drivers, rule enforcers in HR departments. You have the Bezos Club, people that work for the government, and then some tradespeople that actually do things that make the go.
But that counts in bureaucracy, right? The people who work for the government? Or no, I don't think it does, because the bureaucracy are the people that make the rules, and then the employees of the bureaucracy are also a separate power that is seeking, that has governmental authority that is seeking to expand.
Should they be able to vote? If you work for the government.
Good question.
What kind of checks are we going to have?
Well, should they be able to unionize? In my fair state, we have a big problem with that.
My buddy Dallas says that you should get those jobs by lottery.
Yeah. And we're just throwing ideas out here. If you're a public sector union person, but you're not striking against an employer, you're striking against me. It's not quite the same thing as when the auto workers union strikes against General Motors.
I asked, should they be able to vote? Maybe the answer is no. I think I could make some good arguments for that. There's a conflict of interest there. You could vote for the guy that's going to give you the raise. But Maybe they know more about it. Maybe they ought to vote more. I don't know.
I think there should be a survey for the least hospitable climate in the United States, and that's where the capital should be.
I 100% agree.
Death Valley, and it should only meet in the summer. In Death Valley. No air conditioning.
I like that. Vote for Karl.
It's 130 degrees today.
Hell, they built it in a malaria swamp, and they still made it, a destination.
Yeah. Have you been there?
To Death Valley?
No, to the capital, District of Columbia.
I have.
It was weird to me.
It's an odd thing. It's a big, modern city. It's nicer and cleaner and better than almost everybody else's city in the country. And we all paid for it. It's a weird place. I like it, though. The last time I was there, I did.
Well, the museums are nice.
But you can't go now.
No. So I think about that famous line that Benjamin Franklin said as he came out of the convention, and some lady said to him, "Well, what's it to be, Ben?" Probably Dr. Franklin. "What's it to be?" And he says, "It's a republic if you can keep it." Well, that second half, if you can keep it, how do you keep it? I think we've gone a long way in ways that make it hard to keep. I think, like the political parties thing, now that we brought it up, now I'm thinking about that. My third-party friends, they're not all libertarians. I have some other third-party friends who say, well, don't vote for the two big parties. Neither of them are any good, and you're just, vote for a third party or we'll never get off the ground. Well, the thing is, you're never going to get off the ground. Here's the conundrum. You're not going to get a third party off the ground unless you do from the top down some laws to limit political parties.
And that ain't never going to happen.
So you're stuck with the two. You better pick one, I guess. It doesn't fit with the Constitution. The political parties does not fit with constitutional government. They're not going to be divided. So if you have judges and legislators and executives all from the same party, they're not going to be adversarial. They're too united before they even got there. And so they're not going to do what the Constitution envisions. I'm sorry, Madison. I wish it worked. It's a brave try.
Who wanted to read this?
You did.
Nah.
It's your fault. No, it's worth reading. You should go read it, dear listener. And figure out if you think we're right, and it's okay if you don't.
I don't want to be down on that Federalist Paper number 5-1, but I have to be. I don't even know how to wrap this show up. It's killing me. He doesn't make any errors. He only makes oversights. And I don't know that from his desk when he wrote this that there was any way to not have those oversights.
Yeah, probably. So let's end it on a positive note. Here's what you can do. You can be your own James Madison. In 2020, which is when we're recording this, the things that you know now, you think, if I want divided government, what additional checks and balances do I need to put in order? And remember, the goal is not good government. Okay? The goal is preservation of the rights of the minority. You don't want a smoothly functioning government. You want one that doesn't function. That's a very important point from Madison. I think you need to get. If you get good government, well, it's not going to be good government because there aren't any good people. It's going to be efficient government at whatever goal it decides to set for itself.
Well, is that? Well, you're smuggling something in.
Yes, what?
That you need gridlock. That you want it to not function except when there's an enormous widespread agreement. There are people that don't agree with that. They think it needs to be active all the time, managing everybody.
Well, then it's the state of nature. It's the stronger faction can readily unite and oppress the weaker. Anarchy may be said truly to reign as in the state of nature. That's what Madison says.
It's the natural conclusion from that. I was fascinated by this stuff as a younger person. I'm less fascinated now. And I remember reading the Constitution, 6th, 7th grade, and reading some of the Federalist Papers.
Nerd.
I know. And I remember thinking, and then I read some of the history of the thing. And by the way, I think that the Constitution itself is a result of a coup. But I remember thinking, if this is so damn good, why did they let it be amended? The ultimate check and balance here was to make that document almost completely impervious to amendment.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand what the dangers might be. You know, like let's say you and I come up with this Constitution and it has one flaw in it, and it's a dangerous flaw, and we don't see it. It's ratified. Everybody agrees to go by the thing, and then that flaw rears its head, and then we all die of some disease because of this flaw. I don't even know. I understand why they thought it needed to be amended, but I think they should have protected it more than they did.
Isn't the story that Solon, the lawgiver of Athens, he made all their laws, and then the deal was that they couldn't change them till he got back, and then he left town and never came home?
Never came back, yeah. Yeah. What are we going to read next?
We are going to read a wonderful little bit of prose that is so much of a cliche that you probably won't realize how good it is. It's A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens.
What do you want to read after that?
I don't know that I can think that far ahead.
Would you like me to read a little bit of my stack to you?
Sure.
My oldest daughter and I are reading Anarchy, State, and Utopia by Robert Nozick.
Oh, goodness. Did you acquire it by a just act of acquisition?
I did. I traded Specie for it. So if you wanted to read a little chunk of that would grease right on in my schedule. My home book group is reading Don Quixote. I'm from Oklahoma, so I don't say that. I don't do that right. The Edith Grossman translation. That would be good. The Organon by Bacon.
These look so fun.
And then Locke's second treatise on government, whatever the heck that one's called. I can't remember what the exact precise name is.
Why did he need a second one? What was wrong with the first one?
I don't know. The first one's like really short, and then he goes ham in the second one. So any of those things that you might want to tackle, that would or even a selection thereof.
I like the fun stuff too. I was trying to think of some of the science fiction that I used to love.
You know what? Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
That would be good. I've been reading a little bit of Larry Niven recently. One of my favorite short stories of all time is called Inconstant Moon. A little romance about, well, I don't want to spoil it, but some of those might be fun because your list is real heavy.
I know.
There's no laugh lines in there.
And right now I'm reading The Economics of Timber Stand Improvement.
Why don't we just get a book of differential equations and read that?
Yeah, that'd be good. We need to read Killer Angels, which is a little bit of historical fiction, heavy on the historical. You wanted to do James Fenimore Cooper, that enormous book. I want to dig into some fun stuff though. We did Dune, we did Lord of the Rings. There's a whole bunch of like late 20th century science fiction that's pretty fun. Do we need to read some H.P. Lovecraft?
It's creepy.
I have never read a word of Lovecraft. My oldest daughter has read, I think, almost all of him.
Apparently, you know what I was thinking about? What about Zorro?
Oh, I love that stuff. I was thinking about Zorro the other day. Tarzan. We haven't read a Tarzan book.
Sounds good to me. We have to like take your deck of real heavy stuff and then take a deck of the light, fun stuff and shuffle them.
Yeah. My life is such a disaster that the Don Quixote is my fun stuff right now.
Don Quixote's funny.
It is.
That's a good book. Probably a great book.
Well, we'll figure this out. Let's see. There are a bunch of short stories. The Curse of Capistrano was the first Zorro story published in 1924 under the title The Mark of Zorro. So maybe we can find that one. That one might be good. The Mark of Zorro.
Mm-hmm.
Super cool. Well, there's another Online Great Books podcast. I'm sorry. I'm sure we made a lot of people very angry with this. But however angry you are, you're not as mad as me.
It's all right to be angry. If it's okay. think about it, figure out why I'm wrong if you don't like what I said. I'd like to know why I'm wrong.
Yeah, there's some holes there. Go to onlinegreatbooks.com/podcast and join up. We are opening enrollment on the 7th of December. It'll go through the midnight on the 14th. Go join us. Know that I don't lead seminars. Karl doesn't lead his seminars the way we do this. This is not a seminar. This is infotainment that we use to hopefully interest you in what we do so that you will give us your credit card number and then come to our seminars and join the rest of our readers. Come on now, guys.
That's right.
Well, you've already had a wonderful Thanksgiving, I hope, so get ready for December. It's coming. Yuck. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.